This pursuit often begins with investments in biotechnology and life extension research. Some direct funds toward cryonics facilities, where bodies are preserved at ultra-low temperatures. Others explore digital consciousness transfer, funding ventures into brain-computer interfaces. This pattern mirrors historical figures who spent fortunes seeking mythical fountains of youth or elixirs of life. The financial mechanisms involve creating special-purpose vehicles or private foundations to channel the capital. Unlike typical philanthropy, these investments are highly speculative and lack clear commercial pathways. The scale of spending can divert resources from core, profitable business operations. This creates a vulnerability where the primary source of wealth is neglected to fund a long-term, uncertain goal. This shift from conventional business to biohacking is not an isolated incident, but a documented pattern among certain ultra-wealthy individuals. The underlying mechanism often involves redirecting capital from traditional investments toward experimental longevity research. This pattern mirrors historical pursuits of immortality, but with modern scientific frameworks replacing alchemical methods. The public focus shift typically involves increased funding for ventures targeting cellular repair, genetic engineering, and metabolic optimization. Comparisons can be drawn to other sectors where extreme wealth has been channeled into ambitious, paradigm-shifting projects. The multi-front campaign approach often combines academic research, startup investments, and personal experimentation protocols. This represents a fundamental redefinition of legacy, from material wealth accumulation to biological transformation. The pattern raises questions about resource allocation and the ethical boundaries of life extension research. This pursuit would move from a side interest to an all-consuming and ultimately devastating primary mission. First, the scale of investment was staggering. Reports indicate the individual funded numerous private research startups. These ventures spanned from cryonics facilities, which aim to preserve bodies at ultra-low temperatures for potential future revival, to gene editing clinics, utilizing technologies like CRISPR to alter DNA sequences, and pharmaceutical ventures focused on senolytic drugs, designed to selectively clear aged, dysfunctional cells from the body. This pattern mirrors a common but risky investment strategy, placing massive, concentrated bets on frontier science. Such ventures are capital-intensive, have long development timelines, and face significant regulatory and scientific hurdles. The financial commitment required to sustain multiple projects in these fields simultaneously is immense. This shift from diversified wealth management to a singular, high-stakes scientific mission set the stage for a profound financial and personal unraveling. These were high-risk, long-term bets with no guaranteed return, often operating outside mainstream science. Such ventures typically involve speculative investments in unproven technologies or experimental fields. Second, the approach became increasingly personal and experimental. This shift often occurs when individuals move from theoretical interest to direct, hands-on involvement in their pursuits. It's reported they underwent extensive, unproven medical regimens, potentially including hormone therapies. Young blood plasma transfusions represent one of the more controversial anti-aging interventions explored in some circles. Complex daily supplement protocols can involve dozens of pills and compounds taken on strict schedules. These regimens often lack rigorous clinical testing and operate in regulatory gray areas. The combination of financial speculation and personal experimentation creates a unique risk profile. This pattern has been observed in various cases where wealth intersects with pursuit of radical life extension or enhancement. The financial mechanics followed a dangerous trajectory, a pattern seen in many wealth collapses. To fund these ventures and an unsustainable lifestyle, they began liquidating core assets. This included selling shares in their foundational company, the very source of their initial success. They also divested real estate holdings, converting tangible property into fleeting cash. Finally, they leveraged remaining holdings, taking on debt against what little equity was left. This three-pronged approach, selling shares, property, and taking on leverage, systematically dismantled their financial foundation. Such asset liquidation is often a last resort, signaling a critical cash flow crisis. The pattern is clear: spending outpaced earning, leading to the erosion of the wealth that took years to build. This financial shift moved capital from proven, income-generating assets into highly speculative scientific ventures with no immediate marketable output. A major misconception is that these decisions were driven purely by vanity or ego. For the individuals involved, these ventures were often framed internally as the ultimate logical challenge, a pinnacle of problem solving. The goal itself, such as extending human health span, was not necessarily the tragic element. The tragedy lay in the flawed execution and the monumental misallocation of resources. This pattern represents a high-risk pivot from financial security to frontier science without a viable commercial bridge. It demonstrates how rational ambition, when detached from pragmatic commercial timelines, can lead to catastrophic financial erosion. The public facade of supreme confidence often masks a different private reality. The immense pressure and potential isolation of such high-stakes pursuits are rarely documented. This creates a significant gap between the public narrative and the individual's internal state. Furthermore, the exact financial point of bankruptcy is often a blurred line, not a single moment. It can be a slow erosion of assets, a series of failed negotiations, or a final legal declaration. This pattern is common in stories of financial downfall, where the final collapse is preceded by a long, hidden struggle. The downfall wasn't a sudden event, but a protracted collapse that unfolded over time. It began with the loss of board positions, removing influence over strategic decisions. Ownership was diluted through successive funding rounds, reducing control and equity. Forced sales of assets followed, often at unfavorable terms, to meet obligations. Liquidity evaporated as access to capital markets and credit lines disappeared. The financial foundation crumbled entirely, leaving no buffer against further losses. Meanwhile, the scientific results from their investments remained largely unverified or unpublished in credible journals. This absence of peer-reviewed validation meant promised breakthroughs never materialized publicly. The practical lesson here centers on concentration risk, putting too many resources into a single, unproven venture. It also highlights mission drift, where core objectives were overshadowed by speculative pursuits. This principle is demonstrated by historical cases where vast resources were directed toward a single, ill-defined goal. Without clear success metrics or an endpoint, such endeavors can consume capital indefinitely. Diversification acts as a financial safeguard, preventing total loss if one venture fails. It also protects against ideological failure, where commitment to one flawed idea drains all assets. Extreme wealth often lacks the governance structures common in corporations or public institutions. This absence of checks and balances can allow a single, consuming problem to escalate unchecked. The pattern shows that the scale of a fortune does not guarantee its preservation against a monolithic, open-ended drain. This dynamic creates a governance vacuum, where a single individual can redirect vast resources without oversight. Traditional safeguards like peer review and staged funding, which regulate both scientific research and business ventures, are bypassed entirely. This allows capital to flow toward projects based on personal conviction rather than collective validation. A psychological shift often occurs when such individuals move from solving finite, tractable problems. Building a successful software company is a classic example of a solvable challenge with defined parameters and achievable goals. The ultimate transition is toward confronting an immutable condition of human existence itself. When the target becomes defeating death, the perceived budget becomes effectively infinite, as no monetary cost is too high for such a prize. This pursuit is often guaranteed to fail within the individual's own lifetime, creating a tragic paradox of limitless investment toward an impossible deadline. This principle applies across various domains where immense resources are available. In financial markets, even the largest fortunes face mathematical constraints like market liquidity and volatility limits. Environmental systems demonstrate this through carrying capacity. Ecosystems can only support finite growth regardless of investment. Human physiology presents absolute boundaries. Medical technology cannot indefinitely extend biological limits, despite unlimited funding. Social dynamics show similar patterns, where influence and relationships have inherent constraints money cannot remove. Time represents the ultimate unconquerable limit, affecting all equally, regardless of wealth or status. Recognizing these boundaries enables strategic resource allocation rather than wasteful attempts to overcome immutable laws. This rational approach contrasts with historical examples, where ignoring fundamental limits led to catastrophic losses despite vast resources.